live? Let's have a look. Someone, you already have it, so. Hmm? Yeah. Are we live? Okay, I can't see chat. Never see chat. Okay. Can you hear us? Yeah, click on it. No, quickly click on that video. Yeah, click on it. No, quickly click on that video. Okay. Welcome to the stream. My dad's away at the moment. Okay. Back soon. So yeah, there's a video about it. Anyway. Okay. I just gonna play us in. Thank you. Now my dad's made a video. Okay, thank you, Zabby. I didn't expect that part. Wait a second. Is that still working? Yep. Okay. Okay, my dad's made a video. So yeah. Open that up.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show on July the 18th. Britain's Hidden History Live 62 is an amazing number of episodes. And if you're watching this, this means that I am sort of pseudo live or virtual live. I'm like a 2D hologram of me who's not here. Because Arnie and I went to Silverstone today, and I've recorded this. If you're watching it, it means we haven't got back in time. Could be close. So I might be joining in the show at any moment, jumping in and saying, we're back, and have some fun at the end. I'm pretty sure I'll be back before the end of the show. So we've done it this format, which is weird now, because you've got a video within a video, and I'm going to show videos. There's videos in a video within a video. It's the best way to do it, though. Then we can have the chat that we all enjoy every Sunday. So I'm not doing my usual hello to all those people logged in because I'm not actually here. I'm recording this on Saturday. As you can see, it's dark already. So you can put in your comments, carry on as normal. And what I'm going to do, I've got some other videos because I didn't want to let people down and have nothing on a Sunday evening. I know I'd be pretty upset. Get my Sunday evening all ready to go and there's no show on. So I'm going to try. And also, this might be a little bit weird. I'm going to try, obviously I will be driving and giving full attention to the road, as all people should do when they're driving a vehicle. But my co-pilot, Arnie, will be trying to follow the show on his phone. So have a look in the comments now. I think the comments will be there somewhere, there. And if you see Arnie Presents or me on there, you know, it'll be Arnie Presents. Because Leon and Xavi are running the show from HQ. They're not coming this time to the racing. So they'll be doing the normal Britain's Hidden History comments and policing the chat and all that kind of thing. And Arnie and I, if we want to make some comments, will be coming in as Arnie Presents. So this is quite weird for you now. So you have within a thing, within a thing, within a thing, within a thing. So if you can work all that out, well done. The point is, we've got a show. And I know half the time the chat doesn't involve me anyway. Try and stay on subject if you can. But as long as it's history and we're discussing new discoveries and things you found, that's fine. Okay. Right. So, without further ado, I'm going to dive in here because I've got some fantastic things to show you. And I would say the highlight of the show, as you've seen from the... Hello. Why isn't this at the top? Hang on a second. God dear. So I'm not going to re-record this and say, oh, I'll keep going until I get it right, because I know you like to see me get things wrong anyway, so... Everyone loves that. It's that live buzz. So I'm doing this live in one take. If it's a disaster, it still has to go up. Otherwise, it's not, you know, it's like virtual live. So, oh yeah, if you're new to the show, welcome. And welcome back to all those and other regulars amazingly solid audience. You know, we get hundreds and hundreds of views. It's slowly growing every week. And people keep coming back again and again and again, which always amazes me. But it's the content, it's the things we're finding. So if you're new to the show, what we're doing is there was a version of British history, which is what the British said they had, which is accepted for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But they came back from the Middle East. There was migrations around about 1600 BC. Then there were further migrations 500 BC after the Trojan War. The Lost Tribes came to Britain. Various famous artifacts came to Britain. And then history, if you go through the history books, Julius Caesar got his butt kicked out of Britain. And even when the Claudius invasion came later, they got not very far into Britain at all. So all this used to be in the school books, used to be accepted. Shakespeare wrote plays about Troy and all these kind of things. And then really it's always been a problem, like the birth of Christianity being in Britain rather than Rome. That's a little bit awkward for the Roman Church. So that side's always been suppressed. And the Church of England don't like it either, because it's basically an offshoot of the Roman Church. So that's always been unpopular. And then, of course, this idea of a British royal family going all the way back to 500 BC or earlier, and well recorded. That's not very popular with the people who are on the throne, so that's always been suppressed. And the last straw really came about 1700, when the Germanic or German Hanoverians came over and were put on the throne. The Georges, George 1, 2, 3, so on. Deeply unpopular. There was massive sentiment. I mean, they took over in 1714. We already had rebellions in Scotland in 1715. Then you had the 1745 campaign, culminating in Culloden. Wales was about to rise up, and a lot of England as well. So you can see why it was done, that the history was rewritten. And it was rewritten to tell the English they're Anglo-Saxons, when most of them were actually Britons. And the Welsh, Scots and Irish were told they were Celts or Celtic, when there's no ancient reference to this. And they are in fact Britons, the Welsh being the Cymry, and so on. So what we're doing is going to the old ancient records and see, can we find some trace of this still in existence? And yes, we can. We find loads of it. Ancient writing, artifacts, stones, all kinds of things. And then there's a revival in the 1800s. There's quite a lot of history books. History books written before 1700. So these are the kind of things we look at and go through. So buckle up. Buckle up and fly right, because we go through a lot. A lot of subjects covering a broad range. Okay, so tonight, clear's going to be a little bit weird because there's no feedback, there's no comments, there's not even any Arnie. They're in bed, boys are in bed, early start tomorrow, so I can't talk for too long. And the chat I recorded the other day is fantastic. Gentleman David S. Brody, he's written one of many books, you'll see all about it in the video, so I won't talk too much about that. Trust me, I was flabbergasted. All those pictures you see on the screen there, these are all various examples of ancient artifacts found in America, whereas, as you might know, in 1900, a gentleman by the name of Powell made a declaration that, no, there was no one at all, apart from Native Americans in America before Columbus, and that's the end of it. So whatever you find makes no difference. But it makes a difference to us, and hopefully the story will gradually turn, okay? So what I'm going to do now is, I've got a link here. Uh-oh. It's my first mistake. See, no, I could do it. I could re-record this and do it all slick. But I think, actually, as the chat with Dave is quite long, that's 15 minutes, I will go through these, I think, as separate short videos. But the links are there, and I'll put the links in the description, okay, hopefully. Well, I'll probably add them Monday. This is Ellis, regular contributor. And he's found some new information following on, that reminds me of the books I have to talk about, which is Van Orton's book, about St. Patrick, born in Wales, mother Irish though, according to this book. So is he Irish, is he Welsh, doesn't matter really. The fact is he's born in Wales, educated in Wales, went to Ireland, blah blah blah. Ellis has found some more information on this is towards the west coast of Wales, where more about St. Patrick's life and the St. Patrick's Chapel. All right, book available for Cymroglyphics. What is not yet quite going out from Cumberglyphics, which I'm quite annoyed about and frustrated, so please don't ask me more questions or beat me up. I apologise. Here's the proof copy that I had weeks ago. Beautiful, right? All the headers are nice, pages, pictures, everything. And then we've been waiting and waiting, and then great news this week, as promised. 300 originally of these turned up. Fantastic. But unfortunately, there was a mistake on the PDF, and it was my fault. I have to put my hand up to this one. I'm going to record this. No, it's live. I've got to live with it. There was one quote right at the end of the book, which was missing on the proof. And then fate took a hand, and all it was is the founding of Rome. There's an ancient story. Hang on, let's just look at me a second. There's an ancient story that Oxford University, or University of Oxford, was founded by a Welshman, a Scotsman, and an Irishman. And I couldn't find the names of the three of them. And I knew Wilson and Blackett had written about them somewhere in their books. So I gave up in the end. And then, of course, once I sent them off, sure enough, a couple of days later, reading through, bump, I found it. So I thought, right, I'll just make a tweak to the end of the PDF and send it back. And what I think must have happened is I downloaded the wrong PDF to change. Made the change, resaved it, sent it off. And it's made a right mess, because you've got the headers have gone, and that means all the pages splurge up. The pages aren't sized correctly, so things like the indexes. So we've got this. I hope you can see that there. I can't see anything. I'm getting no feedback at all. Just want to show you how the... See, it should look beautiful. It should be beautiful like this kind of thing. It fits nicely on the page. There's lovely columns and headers and stuff. And what we ended up with is just splurge with no headers. And so I just can't send them out like this. It's an important book. If you don't know, it's all about I'm sure you know by now. Just quickly for new viewers. The story of the politics behind Jesus, his family, who the historical Jesus was, how Christianity got started, the events around the crucifixion, how it was all staged, and the deal that was done to get Jesus out of the country and to Britain, where his family married into the British royal family, which is why around South Wales you got Saint this, Saint that, Saint everything, because he got holy blood. And, of course, ultimately, because he's a physical being, where he was finally buried and the burial site. So it's pretty big stuff, right? So thank goodness only got a few hundred books printed. Suggestions what to do with those. But anyway, their printers have been really helpful, understanding. I mean, I think they should have noticed as well when they were seeing them coming off the print. They should have noticed, checked a couple, see if they're right. So anyway, not getting into that. There's no point in going through life being... he's got to move on, hasn't he? This happened. It's a mistake. It's cost us quite a bit of money. And that's a slight issue because every book we sell as well, the share of the money goes to Wilson and Blackett, which already happens. The money's come in for the pre-sale, so thank you very much for those. They're going really well. People could order more books, that would help. Because also, I do send... I'd like to send a larger cheque to Wilson and Blackett because their chimney is gone. And I spoke to Barham less than 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about how he'd been up the ladder fixing the chimney and stuff, and I'm like, whoa, 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 do not do it. And he was sounding quite shaken. Bad idea. Cost about £800 to fix the chimney. I said, we'll send the money, we'll just send it, and it comes out of book sales, or we just send it, whatever. All right, so if you want to help with that, please, you've got the Patreon, or we'll set up a GoFundMe or something. But for now, we're out of pocket on paying for the reprint and paying for that. But anyway, that's life, okay? Right. You don't do this to get rich, if anyone's thinking of doing it. It don't work like that, it goes the other way. It's a bit like my favourite Richard Branson quote, and they said to him, how did you become a millionaire? And he said, start off as a billionaire and buy an airport. So it's a bit like that with this. Start off with some money and some savings, and then watch it disappear. So all help appreciated, please, and please be patient. I am sorry. Printers have said I should get this back by Wednesday and it'll all go out. What can you do, eh? Move on. Don't let it upset you. I don't know if you can see the dents in my forehead from headbutting a wall for about 40 minutes. I'm better now. Okay, so I just want to say that quickly. Right, now, this I have to This is brilliant. If you haven't seen this video yet, please go and have a look at Mariah's YouTube channel. She's fantastic. I've interviewed her a few times on my show. Now Marcel lives back up in Scotland, doing her own channel. This one is brilliant. This is all about the twin pillars, the double L in Welsh, how it ties in with cauldron symbols for it, the connections where the Masonic two towers comes from, and how it ties in with Pisces symbols and all sorts of wonderful stuff. It's less than 20 minutes long, 18 minutes I seem to remember. There's the link, or just go to Marcel's channel, subscribe, watch it, give some feedback, ask questions. Marcel's great. And she's got such amazing depth of knowledge and such a good presenter. Just want to encourage more and more videos from her. So that's brilliant. And it's good to see the whole thing growing, right? It's not just this channel. Okay. Similarly, this one, Robert Shaw has got his channel up and running. Robert Shaw, the author of this wonderful book, which is starting to sell again, which is good. Architecture of Power, starting to get some publicity. Unfortunately, this book came out during the lockdown and we couldn't do any presentations or live events or anything like that. So the publicity is really starting now. So it's like a previous launch and another launch. This book has got brilliant stuff. Explains how you have this video, watch this one from Robert there. Again, it's about 20 minutes. It's excellent, packed with information. And what he's doing there is showing the evidence that was discussed at the time in Parliamentary Committee about who really started the Fire of London. Magic with this book is Robert also goes on to explain more about how the Dutch wars were started deliberately. The plague seems to have been started deliberately. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that. What's the famine? So there's a biblical revenge for the beheading of Charles by the city. There's a lot more than that in this book, and I'm going to do some more interviews with Rob, because it's all things about how the mind works, how memory works, the philosophies of these people, how there's been conflicting a battle for control of humanity goes all the way back to Egyptian times, ancient Egyptian times, and then rolls all the way up into today. Modern, I mean, the book doesn't stop in the 17th century. That's just like a highlight on a long tour of many fantastic sites. And the other great thing is, what the book started off with, here's one of my drawings, is there are 6 churches designed by a gentleman called Hawksmoor. Let's find some more. There's another one. I think that's Christchurch, isn't it? I should know. I drew them all. It's Christchurch and Spitalfields. And if you plot these on a map of London, you can see the Eye of Horus. These were not placed accidentally. And Robert used to be a tour guide in London, toured around these different churches and the major buildings. Oh my goodness, I hope you can see these. I just realised I can't see anything. He knows all about them, and he can explain how the architecture shows why they are where they are, and how they tell this ancient story of the soul going into Egyptian ceremonies with Osiris and everything. And you can see it today in the layout of London. That is powerful stuff. And there's some funny cartoons in that. My usual doodles and things. So that's great. We're doing a lot of American stuff at the moment, just the way it's worked out. Good old Bob Morgan, our sort of guru researcher. He has found a book from 1892. So Lee Pennington's watching this. So I'm having a chat soon with Lee about the Brandenburg Stone. And it's the mound builders. They were looking at the mound builders. And if you're not aware of this, North America, you have the mound builders around Kentucky, that area, the Ohio. And you can see, well, the same sort of cultural links that you have in Wales. And this is partly what the chat, although the chat with Dave is interesting, because David is not as aware of the Welsh connections. He's aware there are some, but it's not his main thrust. His main subject is looking at it from the American side, looking at the evidence, looking at what they've found. You can see it's European. He's not making any assumptions, and he's open to these ideas. And it all ties together very nicely, as you'll see. So you can pause the video and read this. There's loads here, as Rob Shaw says in his excellent video. You can pause the video and read it all, which is great. And he explains about, oh, right, there we go. At the depth of 2 feet... I hadn't read this properly. Ha ha ha! That's a good thing about live, isn't it? At the depth of 2 feet below the second shell bed, 5.5 feet below the summit, 3 skeletons were discovered lying in a horizontal position at the bottom. With the skeletons are 5 copper axes, all of which had been wrapped in cloth. A number of small red stones arranged in the form of a star. 2 carved stone pipes. Several bear's teeth. 2 pieces of galena, 1 large broken pot, a lump of yellow ochre, 1 arrowhead. A children's skeleton was discovered between the 2 large ones, near which was a large number of copper beads. This is, if you're new to Britain's Hidden History, this is like Bob's doing more research now, and if you want to get involved, do research, get going. Like Marshall, start a YouTube channel. Like Rob, start a YouTube channel. Like me, start a YouTube channel. And we've also got Llewellyn Bren, as he calls himself, Jules, Robert St. Kenneth. He started putting videos up on the Facebook group. This is an active thing which is taking place now. And I want to jump to the main event, because there's people who have signed on just to watch the Romans in America, which is pretty staggering. There's the Brandenburg Stone, as mentioned. I'll be discussing with Lee, hopefully this week. Might do it live even. So here we go. And now, I am handing back to producer Lee. Leon. Get my own son's name wrong. Oh my goodness, I can't re-record it. It's live. Got to go with it. Warts and all. Leon, back in the studio, and Xavi, it's back over to you. You now need to start the video, which should be all queued up, which is my discussion with David S. Brody, and I really hope
you had a third sample, and now you're down to 99.9% certainty. And to me, that's the gold standard. You got 3 consecutive tests, 3 different artifacts,
remarkable,
all coming back, Roman era. And now you got something.
Hello, welcome back, and I'm Ross from Britain's Hidden History. And very excited tonight. I got Dave Brody, #1 Amazon bookseller. So welcome aboard, David.
Thank you.
And just to give people a little bit of background, if you follow, we've been talking quite a bit lately about looking at Europeans being in America way before Columbus. And we had Lee Pennington talking on here about finding some old coins and lots of evidence, which just for whatever reasons just won't get into the main dialogue. And of course then got put in touch with Dave, and he's written whole books about this and got loads of great examples. So let's go to you. Whereabouts are you? Where do you live at the moment, and whereabouts are you based, Dave?
I'm north of Boston, city called Newburyport. We think if the Europeans did come before Columbus, as we think they did, this would have been sort of the entry point, the Merrimack River right here into New England, across the Atlantic and into New England.
Okay. So what got you started on this idea of looking for Roman stuff or wherever it is?
Yeah, so I started looking at really Templar era stuff, artifacts, things like the Newport Tower down in Newport, Rhode Island, other carvings that seem to be pre-Columbian, medieval time period related to the Knights Templar. And I started writing books about that. And periodically I would come across artifacts that were much older, Roman era artifacts, and I put them aside and just sort of keep a mental note of them. And at some point after 10 books, this being the 11th that we're going to talk about today, wow, I realized that my pile of Roman era artifacts is getting pretty large, and maybe it was time to start paying attention to it. So as you said, that Lee Pennington's found a lot of these, but you've got coins, Roman forts, other Roman artifacts, many of which have been scientifically dated and tested, iron forging sites that the Native Americans didn't do. And you start to look at all this stuff, and there's a pretty big pile of evidence indicating there was some kind of Roman presence in North America right around the 2nd century, give or take. Now, when we say Roman, of course, that could be Roman as in Italian, national from Italy, but it could be Roman Empire. And of course, that extends all across Europe into England. And we'll talk a little bit about the lost 9th Legion might tie into this story. Yes. The vestiges of the Phoenicians, who were amazing navigators and shipbuilders, were sort of enfolded into the Roman Empire. So when we say Roman, we're really talking about lots of different peoples from Europe, many of whom had the ability and the wherewithal to cross the Atlantic. And so sort of went down that rabbit hole and was surprised, Ross, at how much information there was and really how easy it was to write this book, Romerica.
All right, excellent. Yeah. I'm glad you made the distinction about Roman era rather than just everyone's from Italy kind of thing, because it's kind of this crazy idea we have in Britain that anything that's found here from that era is just Roman. That's the end of it. But yeah, they mentioned the Legion of the Ninth there, because I mean that's obviously that's got particular repercussions. Because I'm in Wales, and the Ninth Legion was based in Caerleon, wasn't it? So in South Wales. So why is it the Ninth Legion? Is that a good starting point?
Yeah, sure. Because actually, that's what got me looking at this maybe 10 years ago. A researcher out actually a friend of Lee Pennington's by the name of Rick Osman, a researcher out in Indiana in the central part of the United States, was doing a lot of research and wrote a book on what he considered to be Roman forts, Roman fortifications scattered about in the Ohio River Valley. And Osman came up with this theory. He did a lot of research and he realized that right around the year 130-ish AD, 2nd century AD, at some point, the Ninth Legion, which had been stationed, as you said, in Britain, really right along Hadrian's Wall between England and Scotland, sort of disappeared from history. And typically the Romans were really good about keeping track of everything. And in a legion, if you're talking about including the camp followers and the hangers-on, you're probably talking 10,000 people. But somehow this Ninth Roman Legion basically disappeared from the historical record. And Osman thought maybe, based on the evidence he found, Roman artifacts and whatnot in the Ohio River Valley, that maybe those two stories were connected. Maybe the Ninth Legion had come across, for whatever reason, made its way to the interior part of the United States, what we now know as the United States. Some of them might have stayed, some of them might have come back, some of them might have intermarried with the native cultures. But that's what got me sort of looking at that for the first time. But my research indicated, and we'll get to a little bit more about, that the Ninth Legion, after leaving Great Britain, there's evidence that they were deployed to Jerusalem to help put down an uprising known as the Bar Kokhba uprising. We're talking 132 to 136 AD, and
Right.
then disappeared. And so my story, my Romerica story, I take what Osman did and take it one step further. I have the Ninth Legion possibly leaving Britain, coming across to Jerusalem, and then skipping town and crossing the Atlantic. And we start talking about the Bar Kokhba uprising and the temple. And now you start talking about the temple treasures and something called the Copper Scroll of Qumran, which lists the temple treasures that were hidden during that uprising. Books talk about that, and you can start adding up, the value of all the treasures that were hidden and still have not been found. You're talking $1.5 billion in today's dollars.
Wow.
And so now you're saying, well, why would the Ninth Legion have disappeared? Well, $1.5 billion is probably the answer to that question.
Oh, you think they did a running with the loot? That's what you think?
Right. So let me back up for a second. We'll work our way up.
Yeah. Sorry, I've dived in the middle. And just let me know when you want to share some pictures.
So that's okay. But the Ninth Legion is sort of an important part of this. But my research journey, after reading Osman's book 10, 12 years ago, and then picking it up again when I started doing my research a year ago on this book, I then started saying, well, hold on. The first thing we have, and Lee Pennington talks about this all the time, is boatloads of Roman coins, Roman era coins, Roman coins. And I know that you find those all the time, in Great Britain and all over Europe. It's no big deal. Farmers pick them up all the time, but it is a big deal to find them in North America. Mm-hmm. And you start asking the quote unquote experts, and they say things like, well, seagulls took these coins in their mouths and their beaks, and they flew across from the European shore, and they crossed the Atlantic, and they dropped them here on our beaches. And I'm like, what? Seagulls? How could that be? And then he said, well, maybe they were ballast in colonial ships, and they got dumped here. And I'm like, who uses coins for ballast?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Gold,
yeah. Or the other one that we hear a lot is that, coin collectors have these coins, and they go to the beach and they lose their coins at the beach. Because I know, Ross, every time you go to the beach, you bring your collection of, valuables, right? Like, honey, grab the cooler and the umbrella. I'll get the towels and the coin collection, and we'll meet at the car. People don't take their valuables to the beach. So there's all these silly explanations about these coins. Well, a couple of years ago, my wife and I moved to Newburyport on the North Shore of Massachusetts, north of Boston. And one of the first things I heard about was this pretty well-known story back in 5 years ago now, 2016, where after a big storm had come across up from the south, up the coast of the Atlantic, that metal detectors go out to the beach all the time. Right along Newburyport, there's something called Plum Island. It's an 11-mile long. Basically, it's a sandbar. It's really a barrier island between the coast and the Atlantic. And so when there's a storm, everything gets washed ashore, and people go out there with their metal detectors. And there's one couple, husband and wife, they just go boom, 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 boom. They got hit after hit. They got over 24 Roman era coins, and the obvious conclusion to draw from that is that these coins were in some kind of buried ship off the shore, and when the storm came up and disturbed that ship, the coins were freed and they washed ashore, and these guys found a whole big collection of them. So, okay, so the question then is, oh, and by the way, this is not the first time that Roman coins were found along Plum Island. Periodically over the years, there's many events of Roman coins being found up and down this area of the coastline. And again, at some point, you could explain away one or two with the seagulls and the ballast stuff, but at some point, there's just too many of these to sort of say, okay, something's got to be going on. My training, Ross, is as an attorney, and one of the things that we get pounded into us as attorneys is you just can't ignore any piece of evidence. That every single piece of evidence that's on the table in front of you has to be explained away, because if you don't explain away, the other side is going to. Like, you just can't ignore evidence. It's going to come back and bite you. So we have all this evidence of Roman era coins in New England. And then I started looking at Lee Pennington's writing, and there's all these Roman era coins also in the Ohio River Valley, up and down the Ohio River, maybe 600 or 700 miles west of New England, the same kind of thing. And along with that, there's a picture of the coins. These are the coins that were found in Newburyport back in 2016. And they tend to cluster again around the 2nd century, but also out in the Ohio River Valley, there's Roman era anchors. There's something called the Brandenburg stone, which is an inscribed stone written in Welsh, which looks to be a land, almost like a land division, a father leaving land to his children. Again, this is written in Welsh armor. This written about, again, way back right around the year 1800 by the first explorers and colonists and pioneers in that area, finding Roman era forts, fortifications. The University of, I believe it was Tennessee, did a whole big dig out there and concluded that it was a Roman era ruins of a fort. I mean, there's some pretty good science behind this. But again, all these coins, all these artifacts, all dating back to the Roman era, there has to be some kind of explanation for it. But we run into this problem a lot, Ross, and in trying to, and you'd alluded to it earlier, trying to turn the ocean liner here in the States to get people to open their eyes to the possibility that there might have been something going on regarding European exploration before Columbus. And that's just it's a hard Rubicon to cross here in America. For whatever reason, we all grew up and all taught in the 2nd grade. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and you learn that stuff as a kid, and it's almost like trying to get past believing in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. I mean, it's just hard for people to give up those heroes from their youth.
I think isn't it a guy called Powell made a declaration in 1900, wasn't it? That there was just no Europeans before Columbus, and that was the end of the discussion.
Right. He was a Smithsonian Institution director, and it just became institutionalized. So even though we find all these evidence, all these coins, and we're looking at the Bar Kokhba coins, I talked about that earlier. That's one of the ways I tied the 9th Legion into this story. And we'll go back to those Bar Kokhba coins.
I see now. I'm with you now. Right. I was trying to think. Yes, of course, Bar Kokhba not being in America. I was a bit slow when I saw the picture. Yes.
Right. The Bar Kokhba coins were minted by the Israelis during their uprising in 132 AD. And this is where the 9th Legion ended up. And now the coins are out in Kentucky in the middle of the United States. And how did they get there? Well,
that is bizarre. Yes.
Connect the dots easily. But one of the great things about this Roman era artifacts is that there's some hard science behind some of these. And so if we could look at something called the terracotta head, it's below the anchor. I think 2 more after that.
Oh, the anchor. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. This was found in in Mexico City, now obviously not the United States, but still North America, back in the 1930s. And it was found when they were digging up one of the Aztec temples underneath the floor of the temple. Now, the temple predates Columbus, so we're talking pre-contact. Underneath the floor, they found this head. So obviously the head predates Columbus as well. The head is been identified by experts in the field as very clearly a Roman artifact. You can tell by the beard, the style of the head. It's 2nd century Roman. And there's something called optically stimulated luminescence testing. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. Your readers are familiar with. So basically what luminescence testing is, I'm going to read from my screen here, but basically what you do is you take an object, whether it's terracotta or stone or even sediment, and you subject that object to laser light. And the light releases trapped particles, and you can measure the concentration of those trapped particles to determine when was the last time they were exposed to sunlight. Basically, what we're doing is determining when the last time was this terracotta skull head was exposed to sunlight. Now, the outside of it obviously was exposed to sunlight, probably yesterday. So you need to drill in and take a sample of the terracotta, the clay, so we can determine when the clay was exposed to sunlight, and that will be the day the head was formed. And so, to make a long story short, the date came back 2nd century, which is exactly the same time as we should be. So we've got this scientifically ascertained artifact to be 2nd century. Similarly, if we go to the next artifact, there are some amphorae, which are basically terracotta jars. There you go. That were discovered in Rio de Janeiro in South America and Brazil, in some place called the Bay of Jars. And basically, during the Roman era, these jars, these amphora, were basically the shipping containers of the ancient world. These also were tested, again, thermoluminescence testing at the University of London, and they again came back 2nd century. Oh. We have a similar amphora jar found off the coast of Maine. Again, Roman era. So we've got hard science and by the way, these amphora found in Brazil, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them. This is not a situation where a random jar was, fell off a ship, happened to be on its way to a museum or something. I don't know what story you could tell, but we got dozens of these.
The Bay of Jars was a clue, yeah.
Because there's so many of them. So there's hard science behind a lot of these artifacts, dating them back to Roman era times. So once I got to that point, I was like, all right, something's going on here. There's too much of this evidence just to ignore. There must instead, be a story. So I wrote the book, and then this happens a lot when I put these books out. Then I start getting phone calls and emails from,
and all the information turns up. Yeah, I know that feeling. Yeah,
right. Yeah, which is great. I mean, one of the reasons why I do this, like, I'm a lawyer by trade. I got to make a better living being an attorney than I can writing books. But I'm really passionate about this, and I joke to my daughters that if I die before figuring this all out, I'm gonna haunt you in your dreams to make you figure it out. But one of the great things is when I write these books and I go and do interviews like this and have discussions like this, people come back to me and say, oh, I know of something else. And I got really fortunate. I got an email from a guy about a month after the book came out. He lives in the western part of the state of Virginia in what's called the Shenandoah Valley. And he has this site. His name is Arkfeld. He has a site that he's been working on for almost over a decade. He's convinced that what he has there, and I think we have a picture of the iron smelting operation. He thinks he's got.
That picture is amazing. Yeah, hang on, that one. Yeah,
there we go. Yeah, this is an excavation he did. He's got a big farm there. He thinks it was a Roman era smelting operation going on, and he's done a lot of work and a lot of testing. He's tested one of those bricks that we see there, which he thinks is part of the furnace of the smelting operation. He's tested mortar from between the bricks, and he's tested slag, and slag is a byproduct of the iron smelting operation. So 3 separate tests, all using, again, optically stimulated luminescence testing. He tested with a guy at the University of Washington State in the western part of the United States, a guy named Dr. Feathers, who's a leading guy in the field. And Feathers came back, and all 3 of the testing dates came back as Roman era, all 3 samples. That's really important. Again, this is my legal training again, because you can get, even in a scientific test, you can get a bad test result, some kind of, mistake in the testing or some kind of contamination. So maybe you have a 10% chance of a bad test. So you repeat the test with a second artifact or a second sample. And now if you get 2 in a row, now it's 10% of 10%. You still have a 1% chance of something having gone wrong. But you had a third sample, and now you're down to 99.9% certainty. And to me, that's the gold standard. You got 3 consecutive tests, 3 different artifacts,
Remarkable.
all coming back Roman era. And now you got something. So we've got this site.
Well, just sorry to interrupt a second, but I mean, surely this must have caused some sort of news or ripple or reaction or something. I mean, this is a big thing, surely.
It should be really big. So
I mean, a Siegel didn't carry this over.
Yeah, so he had a university archaeologist working for him, and as soon as the test results came back, basically the guy ran for the hills. He basically said, "I don't understand this. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm done here." And so I contacted the Dr. Feathers, who did the OSL testing, the expert in the field, and even Dr. Feathers. I mean, he's basically the grandfather of optically stimulated luminescence testing in this country, and he did the test at his lab. And even he says, the results don't make sense to me. We know there was no smelting operation going on in North America back then, so something else must be happening there. Like, why are we bending the science to fit the history? Why don't we bend the history to fit the science? The science is hard. It's hard science. History is malleable. We're always wrong about history. Why are people so willing to change the scientific results to fit the historical timeline that we have in our minds? And Dr. Feathers is right. There was no known smelting operation in North America. The Native Americans didn't do it. So if we're going back to the 2nd century, as these tests, basically that's the cluster of dates again with this OSL testing, even here in Virginia. And this is where we tie back again to the 9th Legion, because my guy down in Virginia, Arkfeld, the owner of the site, he said to me, one of the things that really jumped out of your book, David, was this 9th Legion, because I've been doing research comparing this smelting operation to a very similar smelting operation that the 9th Legion had going up along Hadrian's Wall. Oh, so he had reached the same conclusion I had, going again the opposite way around the same circle here. He had come at it through the back door, I came through the front door, or vice versa, but we both reached the same conclusion, that it was the 9th Legion that had come here. He did it through the smelting operation. I did it through the Bar Kopka artifacts, which we haven't really even talked about yet, but we both reached that same conclusion, that all roads seem to lead back to Northern England and the 9th Legion, the lost 9th Legion. His theory is essentially that the 9th Legion, I guess, and I've never seen this, Ross, I'll defer to you. Is there some kind of something called an iron road or in Sussex, I believe, where there's about a 10-mile road that's built out of iron slag, the byproduct of the slag?
I don't know. No? Perhaps one of our viewers will know. I don't know. I'll look into that. The Iron Road in Sussex. No, and I'm here to that one before.
Apparently, it still exists to this day, but it's
I'll have a look into it. Yeah.
Slag that came out of this, like I can Google while we're talking. All the slag that came out of this smelting operation, they had nothing to do with it, so they basically used
the biggest reserves of iron in. This is why Britain was so crucial to all this. Is that the biggest iron reserves until recent times was in South Wales. It was only recently, I think about the 1800s or 17 something, where discovered large reserves in Sweden. Before that, that was the main site. And of course, the other thing which is crucial for that era was the tin mines in Cornwall, which is essential for making the bronze, which is quite rare tin. Iron isn't as rare, but the point was it was plentiful and easy supply. Rather than having to, crack hundreds and hundreds of stones to get a little bit out, you could just get it quite easily.
Right. The whole copper trade thing that ties into the Phoenicians were coming up to Cornwall to get tin, but probably wasn't enough copper because bronze is 90%, 95% tin copper.
Yeah, mostly copper. Yes, just a little bit of tin to harden it, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. The copper supplies out in the Great Lakes region of America. That might tie into this a little bit as well, as far as the Phoenicians going back before the Romans. But to finish the conversation about the 9th Legion, what the way that they were able to get these furnaces hot enough to make their iron was they used coal. And Arkfeld's conclusion, and I think it's a solid one, is that the reason this operation we find in the western part of Virginia is it's very close to bituminous coal deposits across the border in West Virginia. And so you needed a site in the States that was A, close to the shoreline, that was navigable from the ocean, but B, also close to coal deposits so you could get a hot enough furnace going here to do your operation. So that's his explanation.
Sorry, so to take it, there's iron deposits as well then, is there? Or,
yes. Yes.
There's iron deposits there, you got coal there, so
right.
Things like wood would have been everywhere, so things like that which you need would have all been there. So.
Right, and this was an amazing site. So my wife and I went down there in April to visit the site, and he's got a stream running through the back of the farm, and he thinks that this is what they did to wash things through it. He brought a big magnet down, and we waded out into the stream, and he put the magnet down, and he picked up all this sand because there's iron fragments in the sand. We walked 50 yards down the stream, nothing. But that particular area where he thinks the operation was, all the sand is magnetized because there's tiny pieces of iron shards mixed in from the operation 1900 years ago, whatever it was.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. So he ties it back into the Lost Ninth Legion as well. So let's go back and start talking about some artifacts. So I'm starting to think, okay, so the Ninth Legion, we've got them potentially, according to some sources, in Jerusalem, putting down the temple uprising. Now I'm speculating. I'm picturing a situation where the put down has occurred, that most of the uprisers, the Israelites, the Jews, are being sold off into slavery or being killed. But there's a group of priests who had been in charge of keeping the temple and of hiding and preserving the artifacts. At some point, they say, hold on one second. We're ready to make a deal. We know where the treasures were hidden. We now know, based on the Copper Scroll of Qumran, that those treasures equal about $1.5 billion. And I'm picturing a situation where senior officers from the Ninth Legion come in, and the priestly family say, we're ready to make a deal. If you let us live, and maybe take us with you, by the way, because we don't want to stay here, we're going to get enslaved, we'll share the treasure with you.
Brilliant.
And so a deal is cut.
Yeah.
They find the treasures. Off they go to America, because somehow the Romans knew about it, maybe from the Phoenicians before them, maybe from some other way, I don't know. But they knew about it, and they decided to cross the Atlantic with their treasure, and just to lay low for 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it is, let the dust settle, and eventually go back, or maybe not. But we start looking at the Ohio River Valley area, where there's these clusters of these artifacts, including coins from the Bar Kokhba uprising. And we start to see some really interesting things that tie not only to the Romans, but also tie to an Israeli, a Jewish presence. For example, we've got something called the Bat Creek Stone.
Oh, I know this one, yeah.
Yeah, so this was found in the late 1800s.
I don't know if you're aware, because I mean, I work with Alan Wilson, producing his books and stuff for him. So
right. So this
is Alan who did the translations and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So for a long time, this was found by a Smithsonian archaeologist back in the 1890s. So down in Tennessee. So it's hard to argue with the provenance of this, because again, the Smithsonian found it. And for a long time, it was displayed upside down. The belief being it was a form of Cherokee script. It was a Cherokee artifact.
Yeah.
And in the 1950s or 60s, a Jewish scholar by the name of Henrietta Mertz, an attorney, walked into the Smithsonian, sort of angled her head and said, wait a second, turn that over. That's a script called Paleo-Hebrew that dates back to, yes, here it is, the 2nd century.
Yeah,
and in fact, so this gets interesting, because this Bat Creek stone was found in a burial mound, and underneath it, or with it, were found other objects, ear spools and wooden objects that were carbon dated back to, again, the Roman era time period. So again, we can date this artifact back to Roman era times based on the things that were found with it in the burial mound. And then also, even more importantly, the translation of this Bat Creek stone is a comet for the Jews, a comet for the Jews. Now, The battle cry of the Bar Kokhba revolt was a comet for the Jews.
Wow. Wow.
The comet being a play on the Bar Kokhba name. Bar Kokhba means son of the star. Son of the star being a comet. So they viewed him as a comet, a son of the star, and therefore the battle cry was a comet for the Jews. Bar Kokhba will lead us to victory. And here we have a carving mimicking that battle cry found in the Ohio River Valley, dating back, based on carbon dating, to the same time period, the 2nd century. Let's go to the next one. Starting to get some hard science behind this. It's really tightening them up. This is something called the Decalogue Stone, found in Ohio. Again, another burial mound. And you can see there's a line of Hebrew written in the across the perimeter. It's basically, it's the 10 Commandments. And atop that gentleman's face there, above his head, is the word Moses. So it's Moses. It's a Decalogue Stone. It's the 10 Commandments. Also found buried with a wooden platform. The platform was carbon dated 85 to 135 AD. Again, we're right in the heart, 1st, 2nd century Bar Kokhba uprising, 9th Legion, all during this cluster of time periods. And again, it's Hebrew. Both of these, the Paleo Hebrew written in the Back Creek Stone and the Hebrew on this, if it were just the Romans that had come across, there's no reason for them to be writing in Hebrew. And of course, the Native Americans wouldn't have done so either. So that speaks to me of some kind of Jewish presence. And again, it goes back to the deal, I think, was, and I'm just hypothecating here. The deal I'm suggesting, we'll give you the treasure, you take us with you, okay? Third artifact, the something called the Hanukkah Fort. Also in Ohio, this was found in 1823 and documented first by the Army Corps of Engineers. This is a fortification. These lines indicate fortification walls. And again, this was drawn out by the Army Corps of Engineers. And you can see that the design basically incorporates 2 separate things. At the bottom is what looks to be a 9-armed candelabra, with the center candle being the tallest. And that's very reminiscent and similar to a Hanukkah menorah. Okay. And then above, we have what looks like an oil lamp, the upper third of this. And again, the oil lamp being part of the Hanukkah story. The Hanukkah story being that there was only enough oil in the lamp for one day, but instead God created a miracle and we were able to keep the eternal flame in the temple going for 8 days, which is why we have 8 smaller candles on the menorah and 1 tall one, indicating the 8 days of Hanukkah. But these 2 symbols, the oil lamp and the menorah, are the symbols of the holiday, the festival of Hanukkah. Again,
I've never seen a fort with an outline like that. It's very strange.
Yeah, there's no reason to lay out a fort like that unless there was some religious significance behind it. So we've got 3 artifacts, all very specifically.
Sorry, how big is this fort then?
The fort itself is massive, acres and acres.
Okay.
But it's such a peculiar design, as you say. I mean, look at it, like, who lays out a fort that way? Unless, again, you're trying to pay homage to your gods. You know, we find out whenever we have something crazy like this, it's usually because that's what we think the gods want us to do. It's a religious symbolism. So we've got these 3, in addition to all the Roman era artifacts, we've got these 3 Hebrew Jewish artifacts, all dating back to around the 2nd century, all found in this cluster of in the Ohio River Valley with the Roman era artifacts. So we now have not just Roman era, but 2nd century, but stuff that brings us right back to the Bar Kokhba uprising. And of course, you'd shown it earlier. If you want to go back to show that Bar Kokhba coin that was found, that's one of the earliest ones. But it's there we go. The script on that says Bar Kokhba. It's the Temple of Jerusalem. Again, that's what the Jews were trying to do during the uprising, is rebuild the temple. But this coin was found, and a couple others just like it, along the Ohio River in the same cluster of same area where the other cluster of artifacts was found. So, you know, I've been talking pretty much nonstop.
That's great. Yeah.
All these artifacts
make my job easy.
All speak to some kind of 2nd century presence in first New England and then the Ohio River Valley of Roman era explorers related to both the 9th Legion from Great Britain into the remains of the uprising in Jerusalem that was put down in the 2nd century.
Very good, very good. I mean, that's the other thing from the you know, a lot this writing that Alan Wilson was. You described yourself as Welsh, and maybe even the Paleo Hebrew as well. There seems to have been one of the theories we follow in on our group is the idea of the lost tribes, as they're called, not
Right.
they were ever lost, ending up in South Wales. And the 9th Legion is in South Wales. You got another connection there where the two are kind of coming together. You know, it all seems to intermesh. There's like you're putting together a story here. So, guys,
Right.
two questions I was thinking of. Because first of all, what's the you mentioned? Was there other Roman forts? And also, what's this inscription about? There's a couple more
Right.
pictures to show.
So the Roman forts were found just in the Ohio River Valley. We've seen nothing in the New England area. But again, there was an archaeological dig done by, and I believe the University of Tennessee, even though it was across the border in Kentucky or Indiana. Don't quote me on that, but specific finding of Roman era fortifications. This came to me after my book came out. This was an inscription up in Maine, York Harbor, Maine. I was not aware of it, obviously, but it's written in a Roman script, an alphabet that apparently that fell out of use after the 4th century. I'm not a Roman expert, so I can't speak to why we know that, but experts say that's a pre-4th century script. Apparently, it's a quote from Virgil's Aeneid poem, and it talks about far off at sea and facing a storm-beaten shoreline, a reef often wholly submerged and pounded by the towering breakers. Other local residents say that the speaking of something called Boone Island, where there are mooring stones 2 and 3 inches in diameter and about a foot deep that were found, and they think this is so. In that area of Maine, there's lots of. We saw earlier the amphora from the bay, the Casco Bay up there. There's lots of other artifacts up in northern Maine that are pre-Columbus, and so it may have been that this is where they first came ashore, or came ashore one of many places. But again, another Roman inscription that doesn't seem to have an explanation. Again, the script having fallen out of use around the 4th century.
Wow. Yeah, well, there's so much in this. It's amazing. Do you just think the complete? Is there any acknowledgement at all from academics or anything? I mean, it just baffles me that there's. Well, no, I don't go through all again because we went through quite a bit of this with Lee last couple of weeks ago.
Right.
But I mean, is there any? Do you see any way of getting any of this information through or something? I mean, is there any acknowledgement at least?
I liken it to sort of turning the ocean liner. It just takes a long time to redirect it. I will say, when I first started doing this research, Ross, 10 or 12 years ago, I would give lectures or be on shows like this, and people would look at me like I had two heads, like it's thinking like, there's no way anyone was here before Columbus. And I will say, a dozen years later, people are a lot more open-minded to it.
Oh, good,
now, when I say people, I'm not talking about academia, because they're still not open-minded to it, but the general population, it's now, I think, widely accepted that Columbus was not first to America. When I say widely accepted, I mean, if you were to talk to 10 people in a bar, half of them would say, no, he wasn't first. But again, the problem still is in academia that, and I don't think it's any kind of conspiracy. I've heard people say there's a conspiracy of silence. They don't want us to know. I don't think that's what's going on, Ross. I think it's more a situation where people have staked out a claim and their academic reputations are at stake. They've gone on record as saying Columbus was the first, and they don't want to be proven wrong and have egg on their face. So it's not like one of these conspiracies of silence. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I think it's just basic human nature. I've for 10 or 20 years, I've been saying one thing. If I'm wrong, I look like an idiot. I don't want to admit I'm wrong. And, I'm in that camp now too. For 12 years, I've been saying there are people here before Columbus. If I'm wrong, I'm going to look like an idiot. So I'm going to be kicking and screaming against that. Seriously,
my
I think I'm right, but
my experience is, sorry, I was going to say, my experience is when you change your position on something, people respect you for it, but it's a difficult thing to achieve. No, I agree with you. I'm not, conspiracies on this. I think it's just the difficulty I find is people, the first thing they learn, which is usually at school, It's they. I'm trying to think. Right, I'll tell you what. Alan Wilson described a good situation. He was saying that when someone's working hard for a living, they come home from work, they're tired, they just want to put on the TV, and if a history program comes on, they just assume it's right. You know, they just why would it not be right? They're not like us to analyze information and data and question things. And the same we go to school. I mean, you don't expect to send your children to school not learning something is correct, and they don't expect to learn something is not correct. And then suddenly you're an adult, you know, it's 30, 40 years later, and someone says, oh, by the way, all that could be wrong. Because the people who've been through that system, the same ones who become the next generation of teachers and professors and lecturers, and it's all self-perpetuating machine, isn't it, once it gets going?
Right, but the irony is that, you know, we for years we were taught, for example, that the civilization began in Mesopotamia in the Fertile Crescent, 4000 BC, right? We all heard that. There was no civilization before that. And then we find out there's a site in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, and up to, it wasn't 6,000 years ago, it was 12,000 years ago. We were wrong by 100%. So, you know, why should we be surprised when new things are uncovered in the historical record that change what we thought we knew? It happens all the time. And yet, oh my gosh, it is like, it's like pulling teeth trying to get people. The same thing, even with the, we have a site in Newfoundland in Canada called Lonsdale Meadows that was discovered in the 1960s. The first time people actually believed that the Norse were in North America. Prior to that time, they're like, no, it was Columbus. But it took a long time for the people who found the Lonsdale Meadows site to get the academic types up there to pay attention. It took almost a decade to finally get people to look at it and say, oh, maybe you're right. I guess we were wrong. So I think that's where we are right now. To answer your question on the Roman site, no, there's been absolutely no recognition. And in fact, as I said earlier, the people I would expect to be open-minded to it, the people who are actually involved in some of the testing, even they are like, well, that can't be right. You know, we know there were no iron works in North America then, so our tests must be wrong. Again, the lawyer in me said, we have science on the one hand, we have history on the other. Why are we bending the science to fit the history?
Well, that's the always say, you get your narrative first and then you look for evidence. That's the problem.
Right. And I went back and forth with this guy. I said, that's not how it works. You know, the science takes us to our conclusion.
Exactly.
Now, we can argue, we don't need to repeat these tests. But it's not just the test at the site in Virginia. I think I gave you 6 or 7 different luminescence testing results, all coming back 2nd century. It's 8. If you count 3 in Virginia, there's 7 of them now. That's just too many to be mistakes. And there's just the mountain of evidence is too big now.
And physical evidence as well, of course. Yeah. Chris, before we finish there, thank you very much. It's fascinating. There's one other thing. It's not really I'm dropping this on you a bit, but you know I'm not sure we mentioned it in the conversation, the Newport.
Sure.
Because isn't this another anomaly where it's clearly pre-Columbian and it's just, well, no, do you know much about that one?
Oh, very, very much. As a matter of fact, I'm working on a project now. The group that I belong to is called the New England Antiquities Research Association, NERA. And we're doing optically stimulated luminescence testing at stone sites all over New England right now. We've done about 25 or 30 of them. One of the ones we want to test is the Newport Tower. We want to go down to the tower, excavate underneath. There's 8 pillars, excavate underneath the foundation of one of those pillars, underground about 4 feet, and get some soil. Again, when was the last time the soil saw the light of day? That would be the date of construction. We can test this.
Right.
Yep. We can't get the local authorities to agree to let us do this. And their reasons they say no is, we know how old the tower is. We know it's colonial. Why do we need to bother doing more testing? So this is what we're running into. So I 100% agree with you, Ross. I'm convinced that tower is pre-Columbus. I think it's related to the Knights Templar in the 14th century. It could be a little bit older, it could be a little bit younger, but it's definitely not colonial era. We want to do some testing. People in our group disagree as to how old that tower is, but we all agreed it's probably pre-colonial. And we want to do the testing. We want to put science behind it. Yeah, and yet,
if the tests come back and say it was built in 1750, and so it is, so be it. We all know then, don't we? This is the thing. Can you just give me a quick just quickly then, can you tell us about the other 6 books you've done then? Just a whistle-stop
Sure.
tour of the sort of subjects, yeah.
Yeah, so the series is called the Templars in America series, and it started with the Newport Tower and another artifact in Massachusetts called the Westford Knight, which is a carving of a medieval knight that may have been done by Scottish explorers who were from the families of the outlawed Knights Templar. These would have been the Sinclair family, the builders of Roslin Chapel. So it would have been in the late 1300s. So there's a lot of evidence indicates that they came over here in 1398-ish, carved the Westford Knight, built the Newport Tower in Rhode Island, left other runic inscriptions and carvings, and then probably headed back to Great Britain. But there's, again, they left a lot of evidence and sites in their wake. So that's where I started with all this. And then it turns out there's artifacts. And so every book was a new artifact. Artifacts in the Catskill Mountains of New York, ancient giants found all across the country, evidence perhaps of ancient Atlantis being in the middle of the Atlantic, but mostly circling back always to the Knights Templar. Journals indicating the Templars may have crossed the Atlantic in 1179 and 1180. The Oak Island treasure up in Nova Scotia. That's something called the Cremona document, by the way. But again, things keep coming up.
Sorry, which document? Didn't quite catch that. So I'm making notes as you talk. I'm scribbling away here. Yeah. This is fascinating. Was it Paul Bona?
I'll spell it Cremona, Cremona, which is a town, a village in Italy. After World War II, a journal was found in war-torn Italy in a church that basically described this 1179. It's called A Year We Remember. It's a Templar journey in which they crossed the Atlantic, ended up in the Catskill Mountains in New York, and talks about maybe a marriage contract between Jesus and Mary Magdalene and scrolls that were left, and fascinating stuff. But the Templars are one of those gifts that just keep on giving. But there seems to be like an ever-growing amount of evidence that there were peoples here before Columbus, many of them related to the Knights Templar, but not all of them. Some of them going back even earlier, Roman era, perhaps earlier Phoenician era. The Phoenicians would have been here to get copper to add to the tin in Cornwall to make the bronze you needed to fuel the massive amounts of bronze in the Bronze Age.
Yeah. We got the, of course, we got the guy who was over there, Alan Wilson, translating the Bat Creek Cave and the Brandenburg Stone, which we're going to be talking more about with Lee Pennington soon. Because all the Welsh records show a migration in 570, something like that, where 70,000 people go across. The overall thing to me is, I want to drill on about the Welsh things, is the whole thing is that no one has a problem with the tiny little island, Easter Island, in the middle of the Pacific, thousands of miles from anywhere, gets found. And it's enormous landmass, which you cannot avoid unless you go up to the Antarctic or Arctic, where you're almost bound to hit it. And it's not that difficult to get to. I mean, there are people these days, there's celebrities rowing across the Atlantic.
Right.
The idea that no one could find it is just bizarre. I mean, it's just, there's no logic to it.
I agree with you. I often say that historians are okay with ancient peoples crossing the Pacific, but not crossing the Atlantic. And the Pacific is twice as wide. I don't understand why, if they can cross the Pacific, we can't cross the Atlantic.
The islands they're looking for are tiny little dots on the map, and you can't avoid America. You're going to hit it. And all the currents and trade winds all take you, not in a straight line perhaps, but you're going to hit landmass.
Right. You mentioned the Welsh in the Madoc thing, but we haven't talked about that. In my mind, the vestiges of this 9th Legion and the Jewish settlers that came over to the Ohio River Valley, I think probably a lot of them turned around eventually and came back. Some of them stayed and married into the tribes. It's the Mandan Indians, the quote unquote white Indians, who back at that time lived in the Ohio River Valley. That's exactly where these coins and artifacts were found, is the exact village of the Mandan. And when the earliest observers went and lived with the tribes, the first thing they said about the Mandan was that these are not like the other Indians. They look European. They have religious beliefs that are European in nature. They made these specific comparisons. So to me, that's an obvious connection to make. We've got English, Welsh, Roman, whatever, explorers settling in the Ohio River Valley. And then years later, we have Indians that appear European in attitude and in culture and in appearance and in language in the same area,
Yeah.
Those two seem to be related to me.
Yeah, and that's very well recorded because they had a problem with voting rights and stuff, didn't they? When you had to be white to vote, and then there's suddenly these mandans turn up and they go, well, what about us then?
Right, Menden, also the other group's called the Melungeons. Yeah, that's all.
Melungeons, yeah. I mean, there's another group, the Melungeons. But I mean, there's evidence for these things, isn't it? Well, that's
right,
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, the Melungeons was the 12th book in the series I just finished is the Melungeons. By the way,
so that's the other group. Oh, you've done a book about the Melungeons as well, have you? Oh, yeah, fantastic!
Right.
I'm going to be getting some of these. Hang on a second. Let's put the screen share back. Let's put your book back up on there. If I can do this, hang on. Yep, I can do this. So, is it Amazon's the place to go for your books? Is it?
That's the easiest place. Yeah, they're Kindle and they're paperback, and the first 3 in the series are audio. I try to keep them affordable. Again, I want people to read these books. This is my passion. I want people to read the book and call me up and tell me they've got a carving in their backyard they want me to come see. So that's
something to add. Yes.
Yeah. They're fun. They're fiction. They're historical fiction, but I've never had anyone complain there wasn't enough information or history in them. They're packed with information and they're illustrated as well. So you'll see all the artifacts that we had pictured on the screen today. They're in the book as well, because I think it's important that when I write these, because they are fiction, I want the readers to know, yes, the story is fiction, but the history and the artifacts, those are real.
Yeah, it hasn't come completely from nowhere. Yeah.
Right.
Fantastic. Hi, guys. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Is there anything you want to add?
That's
Sorry for didn't mean to cut you off there. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about there? Is there?
Nice to be speaking with somebody who's so knowledgeable and enthusiastic about this. So,
well, I'm enthusiastic anyway. Well, brilliant. I shall definitely be looking up. Well, I'll be getting some of these books. I'm very interested indeed in all this. So, thank you very much for your time. And I hope we'll have to speak again soon.
Ross, thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hello, thank you for watching, and thank you for David for coming on the show. It's brilliant. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. This topic of evidence and history of pre-Columbian Europeans in America is vast, and we've got some other videos about it with Professor Lee Pennington. You'll find these in the American Hidden History playlist, if that's your particular interest. And if you're looking for the books from David S. Brody, just do what I did. Go to Amazon, type in his name, David S. Brody, and have a look down. Lots of, I have to say, fascinating looking books. They really do look good. There's Romerica, what we're discussing tonight. Another one really caught my eye, and I have to get David back on for another chat, is this one, which is about the American Ark of the Covenant. So I don't know what that's about. Because if you know, the Ark of the Covenant's a big part of Britain's hidden history and when it came to Britain. And if you're new to the Britain's Hidden History channel, please have a look around the videos. We cover lots of subjects like this. As the name suggests, mainly it's about Britain's hidden history and the fact that nothing can be pre-Anglo-Saxon or pre-Roman. There's a live show every Sunday at 8 o'clock. Please come along. We discuss these things. A Facebook group. As you can see, we mostly tour around Britain. That's where we are. At the tops of mountains, the bottoms of caves. Things from megalithic eras. Trying to work out why these stones are there. And also, tragically, the fact that lots of megalithic sites, old ancient walls, are being destroyed deliberately. And you can also see how to read Egyptian hieroglyphs. You can trace the Welsh language back through its migrations all the way to Egypt. If you'd like to help support the channel, please, the main thing you can do is subscribe and click like and spread the word, help the channel to grow. And if you could become a patron supporter, that'd be fantastic. So, until the next time, from me, Hedwch, which is peace.
This video. My dad, Arnie and Ross are sorry that they couldn't make it to today's live show. So thank you for watching, and like and subscribe, and I'll have to end the stream. Thank you.